those of you who have already logged on for this Science You Can Use webinar, we will get started here in just a few minutes and let people keep logging on. All right, it is 10 a.m., so we are going to get started. Welcome everyone to the Rocky Mountain Research Station's Science You Can Use Spring 22 webinar series. My name is Lexi Newkirch, and I am going to be your facilitator today. We are going to possibly have some closed captioning down at the bottom of your screen. You can select the button there. And I also invite you to now open the chat and introduce yourself, just your name and where you are joining us from today. During this session, we are going to be hearing about exploring the Interagency Fuel Treatment Decision Support System. It's going to be a great topic with a couple of really great presenters. This is the first of our 8 webinars in our spring webinar series, so stay tuned for some more great presentations. For your awareness, we are going to be recording this session and all future sessions, and we will be posting the recordings as well as the presenter slides for you to access on our Science You Can Use webinars page. And I posted that link at the top of this chat, and I will post it again in a few minutes for all of you to access. These webinars are eligible for SAF and the Wildlife Society continuing education credits, and we will post a link to register for those at the end of the presentation and before our Q&A session begins. The format for today's presentation is going to include a short presentation from both of our presenters, followed by a Q&A session. So if you have questions that are coming up, feel free to start putting them into the chat box and we will get to them during the Q&A. We will also have some people who will be answering questions within the chat box too. So you might be able to have your questions answered there or by our presenters during the Q&A. I have put a couple of useful links in the chat related to IFTDSS, and I will continue putting some more of those in as the presentation continues. Now I want to introduce our presenters. We are joined today by Caroline Noble and Kim Ernstrom. They are going to be taking over now to give you their presentations. Take it away, Kim.
All right, thanks everybody. Yeah, hi, my name is Kim Ernstrom, and here with Caroline today to share this presentation and a little demonstration on IFTDSS. So let me go ahead and share my screen. That always is a challenge, as we know. And let me see if I can get it into presentation mode. Are we good, Lexi?
Looks good.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We're excited to share this with you. And I know some of you have probably maybe seen and used IFTDSS already. But what we're going to do is kind of a high-level overview and then show you some examples of how folks are using IFTDSS in the field. And then Caroline's going to do a, she'll actually demonstrate the application itself. So she's going to log in and walk through some of the navigation and some of the pieces of it. So I'm just going to do a quick little intro here, and for folks who maybe aren't familiar with IFTDSS, just to give them an idea of where we came from and where we're headed. And I think the kind of the key parts that I think you'll find probably most useful, depending on what your job is in the field. So both Caroline and I work for the Wildland Fire Management RD&A, and we've been working on this IFTDSS project for quite some time, 5+ years. And we're real excited about the things that are both that what we have available now and also what's coming in the future. So let me just go ahead and get started. This is our team. We've got a great team of folks, and a few of them are on the call with us today, Josh Hyde and Nicole Vaillant. They'll be answering questions in the chat. Henry Bastian is our project manager, and he kind of keeps the wheels on for us and keeps us out of trouble. So we're all available for questions and such. So we'll have this presentation available for y'all afterwards in case you wanted to reach any of us. So IFTDSS, this is the homepage to IFTDSS. I always kind of like to start off with this, mostly because we try to keep this updated and keep a lot of information available sort of at your fingertips. So before you even have to log in. So this is what you see before you even log into the system. And these are all links. This is just a screenshot, but these are all links at the bottom. So if you wanted to just check something out or read about something, you can always access the online help system without having to log in. And then we try to put the latest current updated information on the homepage. So this is typically what you see on the homepage if you want to grab some quick information to share or just research for yourself. So the user support tab that's in the upper right corner there is where you'll find all of the help system information. And we'll touch on that kind of towards the end. So just a real quick background on why IFTDSS. Why do we have IFTDSS and where has it come from? There was a proof of concept that started back in with the Joint Fire Science Program way back in 2007. And we've evolved since then. Obviously, there was a prototype that was around for a long time. And then the RDNA took the project over and actually released this version that you're seeing now back in 2017. And since 2017, we've been able to really evolve things and add quite a bit of functionality, which we'll show you today. You know, the idea was to really grab a bunch of these tools and planning tools and analysis type tools and try to put them in one place so folks can do their fuels planning and consider the risk, you know, the risk-based decision-making that we're always asked to do these days, but try to streamline it and really make it available to folks who are not necessarily GIS experts. I know that's a skill that, you know, gets depleted over time. My skills in that certainly have, but IFTDSS does allow folks who maybe aren't an expert in that to still work in a map interface, look at spatial modeling, and also try to get some of these tools into the hands of folks early in their career. I think we found a lot that we don't teach a lot of these things until much later in people's careers. And we sort of really miss the boat in getting folks up to speed on using these planning tools and such early on. So, you know, that's really what we're trying to do here is use it to teach folks, but also all the way up through, you know, folks who are experts in some of these things. I think will find some of these tools and workflows to be quite useful. And we'll show you how you can do that both in IFTDSS, and also you can export a lot of information out of IFTDSS and use it in other places. So the scale that IFTDSS was built to work at is more at the project and the unit level. We have all their tools that work sort of at the regional and national level when it comes to risk assessments and mapping and things like that. But we really wanted IFTDSS to be focused more on the project and unit level. So we can run landscapes when you get your land fire data and start your project up to about 3.5 million acres. So that covers probably not all national forests, but many of them. Definitely national park level, some of the BLM districts, depending on where you work, down to, you know, we've got a lot of folks working at the state level or just a local district level and a lot of non-federal folks as well. So we can really scale things, you know, down from the small, say, burn unit all the way up to an actual, a planning unit of some kind. So that's really what we're focused on. If you're looking for national and regional level types of analysis, then we probably need to look at something a little different than IFTDSS. Although some of the products from IFTDSS could feed some of those things, and they should be able to tier back and forth. And we'll talk about that a little as we go. So some of the things that folks are using IFTDSS for, and I'm going to show you some examples after Caroline does the demonstration, but we're finding a lot of folks using them for specialist reports, doing NEPA analysis, prescribed fire planning, community wildfire protection plans. We have the risk assessment function in IFTDSS now, and people are starting to learn how to use that. I've had folks comment to us about how they really like the map interface in IFTDSS when they're doing a public meeting It's real easy for them to explain things and navigate through the map. So there's a whole variety of things and there's probably a lot of things we don't even know about. So if you are one of the folks that are using IFTDSS for a project, we love to hear what you're doing with it. So we can share that and understand better how the user community is using the tool and how we can make it better. We are constantly looking for feedback. So definitely let us know if you've got a project and you're using IFTDSS. Please let us know. And if you've got suggestions and stuff, I'll show you a place at the end that you can help provide some of those comments for feedback for us. So we've got over about 3,200 users right now, give or take, and it's about a 70-30 split between non-government and government. Like I said, we've got quite a few non-federal folks, non-government folks in the system. So, and our user base grows every year. So share it with your friends. IFTDSS is open to everybody. We want it to be a very accessible tool, and so folks can collaborate across boundaries and share their work with others. So definitely share the love here and let us know if you've got folks that want to learn more. Please pass some of this on. Okay, so that was just a quick intro, just to give you a little background if you're not familiar. I want to turn it over to Caroline because this is the most interesting part. And with Caroline, we always have to buckle our seatbelt. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn it over to Caroline so she can walk you through some of the actual application.
Great, thanks, Kim. Can everyone hear me? And are you seeing me Googling the word IFTDSS?
We are, yes.
Okay.
Oh, you're good.
Just in case there's people that want to create an IFTDSS account that haven't had one in the past, it's as simple as Googling IFTDSS. It'll be your first hit. And you can click that link and request an account and register. Kim showed you the home page and the landing page. We said buckle up because IFTDSS has grown considerably since we started building it. And its functionality ranges from a beginning fuels tech to a cooperator that does projects with federal agencies to research. So there's quite a bit to show. I'm just going to kind of do more the how and the what, and Kim is going to talk a little bit more about the why, but every aspect of this could be explored in a lot further detail. And just for your information, it's probably of interest. Kim and I were hired not for our software development expertise, but because we have backgrounds in fire and fuels management. So in guiding the development of the application, we tried to represent a field user perspective and give some subject matter expertise. So with that said, when you arrive on this homepage or landing page, you'll see something called the planning cycle. And the intent of this is to sort of provide examples of the functionality and where in the life cycle of fuels management work it would fall. So these are interactive, I call them pedals that take you to different places in the application. Also across the top, we have a navigation bar. You'll notice that there's some overlap. Map Studio everything is so spatial for this. And the point here is that this is not an application where there's a mandate or policy directive to use it. We don't have a lot of cookbook, go into IFTDSS and do A, B, and C. We provide tutorials and help content, but this is really a place where you can sort of explore and move around from piece to piece, and you can't break it. You might get lost for a second, but it's not something that has a lot of rules associated with it, and that should be a comforting thing. So if I go to the cycle on the navigation bar, again, you'll see this cycle, and each one of these pedals, as I mentioned, has a little set of cards associated with it. So this is sort of the way you can see everything that the application has to offer. I'm just going to give a quick overview of each one. When you select one, in this case, I've selected landscape evaluation. It will open up and provide this list of cards of things you can do here. And then on the right, you'll see there's some, we call a right-hand panel that has helpful content and links. And on each, if you hover over each card, it sort of describes what happens if you select that card. And again, these are not necessarily in order by any means, but they're sort of how you might think about it. Landscape evaluation being the first thing you do when you're thinking about doing a project related to fuels management or fire management, then onto strategic planning, implementation planning, monitoring and reporting, and so on. It mimics the adaptive management cycle. So in landscape evaluation, where we are now, you'll see the starting point is a landscape. These are spatial land fire landscapes that most folks are probably familiar with. And then there's summarizing landscapes and editing landscapes, as well as modeling fire behavior on your landscape. Under strategic planning, under the strategic planning portion of the cycle, it gets a little bit more in depth with some comparison functionalities. At the top, you'll note that we have this bar at the bottom where there's future development. So that's functionality and not yet there, but we have a compare weather piece and then a develop treatment alternatives piece. And then this whole subsection in strategic planning below that gets into a more detailed analysis of hazard, exposure, and risk assessments. And I'll give a quick overview of those, and Kim will describe some of the applications of that. Under implementation planning, you'll start to see some repetition. So some of these cards are the same with the thinking, if a person is simply coming here to do implementation planning, they can go straight to this portion of the application, create their landscape, edit it, model fire behavior, do some comparisons, and they don't really have to work outside of this specific implementation portion. So there's some mixing and matching. The development under monitoring and reporting is not fully developed yet. We have ideas of where we're going to go with that, but for now, this is primarily just a link to the fuels treatment effectiveness monitoring system under both monitoring and reporting. You can see we've got some ideas for the future under here, but not yet developed. So that's just an overview of the cycle. And then you'll notice that in the center of it all, we have what's called the map studio. Again, we've also got a map studio on the navigation bar. So the thinking is that everything surrounds a map, right? So this is a basic, Esri map. You've probably seen similar ones in many applications. Oops, I gotta move this Zoom thingy. So there's a little circly icons down at the bottom, many of which are typical. There's your layer list, the ability to add layers. So I just want to show a few things. When you select add layers, what's important here is that there's a whole bunch of reference layers available. And these are similar to what's in WFDS, if folks have used WFDS, but they cover CONUS and Alaska and Hawaii in many cases. So the entire US across not only the federal lands, but also partners. So that's a pretty important thing, is when people can be doing planning across boundaries, referencing these same data sets, boundaries, whatever they may be. These are worth exploring. And then in addition to these, users can have their own layers. They can upload shapes and shapefiles into the application and have them available for use. Some of the other circles, here's where you upload a shapefile. You can bring it with attribution that you can use. You can create landscapes, display your outputs, create and edit shapes from reference data, change base layers, etc. So, for example, the landscape tool, this is, you saw a create landscape card. It would actually take you right here to the map studio. You can hit create new, and then you can either draw, draw a small box, or select an existing shapefile to create a landscape from, determine where it goes. And we've got right now 3 versions of the landscape data available. In the future, we're going to be switching to the landscape fire product service, where we're going to have more versions of that data available. But for now, these are the 3 choices. And then you select create, and your landscape would be created. And what's kind of fun here is, so if I add to map, say one that I've already created in the past, It'll automatically zoom to it. You can open a layers list and it's automatically expanded to, for landscapes, it's the fuel model. You can begin to immediately kind of take a look. This is the Osceola National Forest. See what you've got, and you can overlay other things you've built in the application. For example, model output. You can filter by your map extent and say, oh, I have some Osceola National Forest outputs here. I'm just going to plop those on the same landscape. And now you've got a couple of different layers that you can take a look at. If I just collapse layers and see, oh, okay, here's, I've got, in this case, I loaded a risk assessment, but a swipe tool to look at the relationship between your fuels and your model outputs, identify tool, where you can drill down and see some of the different attributes associated with the different things you have, like fuel model, canopy cover, all the base layers for a landscape. So this is all, as we said in the beginning, this is not rocket science, but if you're a non-GIS person, this is a pretty powerful set of tools and data at your fingertips without having to go through the gyrations of managing all that spatial data or being reliant on a GIS person. It's all available within the application to you or you create it. So I want to spend a minute there in the Map Studio. Are there any questions so far that I need to address, Kim or whoever's monitoring questions?
If you could real quick, the Map Studio, just to show the 3 dots next to one of the reference layers where you can get information about that reference layer.
Sure.
Just to show that we've got some of the metadata there in case folks are wondering.
Okay, I have to pick one that actually has it.
What layer we're using. That's a good question.
Oh, I have to open it up in the layer list, I think, to do that. So here, say for wilderness.
There you go, yeah.
Click metadata. And it goes to the metadata.
Thanks.
All right, anything else in that regard?
No, I think you're good right now. Someone did ask how small a project to use IFTDSS for. And I mentioned in the chat that, land fire is done at a 30-meter pixel level. So that's going to probably drive, how useful it is for a very small project. But
right.
Use it on a
yes.
small project.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Okay, so I've probably got to speed up a little bit. So back to the planning cycle to show the different things we discussed creating a landscape. I mentioned landscape summary. This is just an example of the types of reports you can get very quickly. I won't go into a lot of depth, but this is an automated summary at what's the 97th percentile, it's called. So, near worst case conditions based on some historic data that you can immediately generate a report for once you've got a landscape. Here's Glacier Park. I'll apply it to the boundary. I request a report. In this case, I've already done this in the past. So, and I immediately have this report available that, has what I've just requested in terms of a summary of the fuel models. On the left here, you can click around fuel model elevation, flame length. The model inputs for this 97th condition are listed here. You are certainly not locked into those. This is just a quick and dirty to show the what this model will create for you, and then the user can go ahead and edit these in what's called the playground, and I'll show that, and get outputs for the conditions that they think best represents what it is that they're trying to do in the application. So that's all in this early landscape evaluation portion. The landscape edit is important. I mentioned we have a few versions of Landfire available. As we all know, Landfire data is not always perfect. You may be editing just to correct the Landfire data for known sort of errors in your area. You can look at it in a split screen, or you may be editing the landscape to simulate proposed treatments of the future. So in this type of scenario, if you want to game out future fuels treatments, for example, if I start with my national forest boundary, you have 2 options for editing the landscape. You can either do a more traditional, what's called a user created rule, where you're saying, where, something exists, field model is, or canopy cover is X, I want to change it to Y. And you can do that applied to a shapefile or for the whole landscape. But the more interesting part is we have this, what's called default fuels treatment or disturbance edit rules. So this is where you can either game out or recent disturbances that have happened on your landscape. You can say, okay, well, I know we burned last year and the landscape data does not yet reflect that. So you can select, for example, wildland fire with simulated prescribed fire, say it was low severity. We did it last year. I did it in burn block 353. It'll zoom to it, add that to my rules, and it'll create a new landscape automatically without expecting the user to know what edits to do to the various landscape attributes in order to represent a prescribed fire in the landscape. There's some pretty black box stuff going on there, but it's the same set of editing tools that the land fire team themselves use when they do landscape updates. So that's just an example. And I showed an example of a prescribed fire, but there's others that are different mechanical treatments, thin/remove, thin/remains, each one having a severity and a time since disturbance. A lot to unpack there, but that's what landscape editing can do for you. So that's the three sort of landscape tools within landscape evaluation. And then once you've got a landscape, you're able to model fire behavior. So we have a card here. It matches if you click the playground, they take you to the same place. It's short for the modeling playground. And once you get here, it's a pretty straightforward input entry to run these models. So there's typically training associated with running some of these models. In IFTDSS, you can certainly get an account without any of the training, but it's worth taking the time to read up the help content or get a little background on the various models available in IFTDSS. There's currently 3: landscape fire behavior, otherwise known as FlamMap Basic or Basic and WFTDS, MTT fire spread, also from the FlamMap family, and then landscape burn probability, sometimes known as the random ignition burn probability from FlamMap. In each of these, you select the model type and you say create run, you choose a landscape, and then you do the same inputs you would do in any other fire behavior prediction modeling using this model: wind speed, wind direction, fuel moistures. We have conditioning available. It defaults to don't condition, but you can use a weather stream that you upload, or you can just say, do this for me. It'll look to see if there's a classified weather stream available for your landscape. Then if there is, right now we only have extreme. So worst case, you pick that and you run or save it. And that's how you get a model going. So within the playground, you can do that for any of these 3 model types. You can filter here to see what you've already run. And when you select on a model, you've got your status. I've completed all these. You get this thing like an expanded menu that shows you what your inputs were. So you can get a quick glance. You could do a screen capture of this if you're documenting it. What was my model run input? And then you can also select view on map. I want to go see the outputs of my model run. It will immediately take you there. I was running to test after a update to the application. And these are the MTT outputs displayed on the map. So that's a very quick description of modeling, but that's really all we have time for, I think. Is there any quick questions on that?
I think you're okay there, Caroline, for now. We've answered some in the chat, so keep tossing those in there and we can hit towards the end too. But go ahead and keep going.
Thanks. Like I said, there's a lot to show. So the next place I want to show you is actually, so it's not in the cycle, it's called the Workspace. This is just with the things that I've started demonstrating with the landscapes and the model runs. This is where all your stuff goes, all your files, sort of like a Windows Explorer. So I just want to demonstrate that not only can you manage this through, moving files around, creating folders, you also have these filters where I could look at I just want to look at my landscape, say just for a particular project that I was working on, and it'll narrow down that list to what I've been working on. So it's a pretty handy way to find stuff. And then while you're in here, each one of the rows here, if you select it, again, it's this expanding thing. In this case, I'm on a report, but it gives you some options. You can delete it, you can move it. Reports are pretty simple, but I could view another report. Similarly for, say, a model output, I could view it. I can download it. You can download all these files for use in an external GIS system, delete it, that kind of thing. So there's quite a bit that you can do within this workspace, and that's where you go find stuff. So now I'd like to take you to the strategic planning portion of the cycle and just give a quick overview of what's in here. As I mentioned, we have yet to develop some pieces of it, but this compare weather is pretty neat. So in the first portion, your building blocks are your landscape and your model runs, and you can begin to do things, do some analysis, do some comparisons with those building blocks that you've created. So compare weather, I'll just show it quickly, is a way that you can have on one landscape, you can do a variety of weather scenarios to compare the outputs. It's available for all the models. And if I just pick something to kind of show what types of outputs you can get, let's just say, here's one for landscape fire behavior. And I've got some examples of low, moderate, and high inputs. And then you get these thumbnails that give you a pretty quick sense of, okay, red means I have really high flame lengths, green means they're low. You can move these around in the order that they're in, et cetera. But that's a pretty quick assessment of what these inputs are going to provide in terms of model outputs. And then below it is a table of your inputs, so you can glance and you go, okay, what did I do here that really triggered these high flame lengths in this model? Oh, it's these very low herbaceous and woody fuel moistures, or maybe it's the lack of fuel moisture conditioning. So you can also self-train quite a bit on what the model input influences will be on your model outputs. You can also see these thumbnails in the map in this compare mode, which is pretty neat. And all the outputs are displayed, and you can sort of click on one and it'll just show that one output. And again, you can do this for all the different model types. And you can also like zoom to an area of interest if you just have one particular area that you want to look at. In this case, it's sort of this purple hash mark. So pretty neat tool to compare different weather scenarios. So that's the compare weather functionality. This developed treatment alternatives. In that case, we were comparing weather. In this scenario, what you'd be doing is comparing landscapes. So this is where you could take the different landscape alternatives, say if you were doing a NEPA analysis and trying to do some comparisons on how they would influence the model outputs. And I'm not going to walk through the how too much, but it's a left to right tab system. You have some different landscapes, you run the model. In this case, I've got like an existing condition and some different alternatives. And then you have the ability to compare these alternatives in either the map or in a summary report. And you can compare both the landscape and the fire behavior to show you what a report looks like. So these are also very useful tools to compare proposed treatments. In this output, for example, we're looking at the flame length, the green being the existing condition, the blue being the treated landscape. And you can see I'm hovering right now over the greater than 25-foot flame length. So we started out with 60% or 59% of that type of flame length in the model output. And after the proposed treatment, the model is showing 32%. So if the objective was a reduction in flame lengths at these higher classes, this might be an alternative worth looking deeper at. So this functionality, these reports can be downloaded as PDFs. Each little section can be downloaded. The data can be downloaded. I will say that this is functionality we would like to expand. Right now, you can only compare within the application 2 alternatives at a time. If you want to do more than that, you have to, you would download some of the data to Excel, and you'd have to kind of take it from there in your own analysis, but we know it's a desired functionality for the future. Let's see, so that's the top of the strategic planning. I'm running low on time, I think, Kim, but the
yeah, you can
lower
take
section.
a couple more minutes, Caroline, if you want. That's fine. I think we're good.
Okay, exposure and risk in 2 minutes. I got this.
There you go.
This is more for, you know, the idea of analyzing hazard, exposure, and risk is very important in fuels management right now, trying to determine priorities, trying to look at which areas will be most effective. There's a lot behind this. I'm certainly not going to be able to cover much, but I just wanted to explain that what is available in IFTDSS. The model burn probability would just take you to the playground that I already showed you and run that specific model of burn probability, which is a building block to do hazard exposure risk assessments. The map values I want to show real quick because, again, this is where the application, you can leverage a lot of existing data. So map values, what it does is it has a bunch of data. Just pick an example again from like, oh, here, let me go to a different place. Let's go to like California, Sequoia and Kings Canyon. You select a geographic extent, and then you have a suite of, these are called HVRAs, highly valued resources and assets, categories and data available to you. And you can just sort of shop for that data in here. It's already in here. Let's look at air quality. I want to look at 2 of those. You can see the data. You can see where it intersects your landscape. If you keep that with a check mark, it's selected. Similarly, you can look at communities data. There's metadata on all this, but this is a really great way to just do some quick analysis by creating this value set and saving it. And then you have that available as a set when you want to look at your model outputs. And that's essentially what you start to do with exposure analysis and then further with risk assessment. So with exposure, to show a quick example, if I go to the workspace and pull up an exposure analysis I've already done, for example, you can just, as I've shown you, have all these options. I say view on map. It's going to bring up the landscape burn probability model outputs and all the values that I've selected in this set. And you can look at how that burn probability model output sort of relates to, say, your community density. In this case, you know, the communities of higher density, say, being in these pink areas, and then I can look, what is the burn probability associated with those if I zoom in? Some of them say, oh, well, that's not too bad. You know, these blue numbers are the lower burn probabilities, and my highest burn probability is in these redder colors, and there's no communities. So there's different ways you can just look at that crude data, or you can do actual analyses which provide quantified reports for things like exposure analysis that help you see. Let me just find an exposure report. What the different probabilities, flame lengths and stuff are with these different values you've selected. We've got something called integrated hazard, with which you could explore, et cetera. So there's a lot packed into that whole strategic planning portion of the cycle, but I'm going to stop there, Kim, because that's already burned up a lot of time.
Okay, no, I think that's great. That's a good overview. It really gives folks the ability to see kind of how how you navigate around and how you click the buttons and what's available here and there. There's a ton of more information. That story map, we put the link in there. That's a new story map we just put together. Mostly it's trying to show people where to, where to find a lot of extra information. So thanks, Caroline, for running through that. We encourage you guys to really go back and maybe read some of these other things. Let me real quick, I want to show you a few. I'm going to go ahead and if you can stop sharing screen, Caroline. I'm going to flip mine back on, and then I want to show you uses that people have done. Thanks. And some examples from the field here, and then we'll show you where to kind of get additional information. So, okay, hopefully you are seeing. There we go. Does that come up? I had a little delay there. Uses in the field.
Looks good.
Okay, great. So this is sort of a compilation, like I said at the very beginning of the presentation, of where folks are using some of these things. I'm going to show a couple more specific examples, but you can kind of see the range of where some of these outputs are being utilized. This is a NEPA report example that I got from some folks over on the Caribou Targhee, and this is the treatment alternative example that Caroline demonstrated, where you walk across the tabs and you can show this reduction, in this case, in crown fire behavior, pre and post treatment. So if you do a treatment, how does that going to affect my crown fire? So that's a piece of this that they used in their report, demonstrating one of their alternatives. So that's sort of a real example of how IFTDSS is being used, the report piece, the thumbnail image, and then, writing some text to explain how you went about doing that. So their report contains a whole bunch of different pieces from the treatment alternative section with this differences in fire behavior pre and post treatment. So that's a real easy use for some of that. Using IFTDSS for burn planning, that's been a big topic lately. I think with all this money coming through or eventually coming through with this infrastructure law, I think there's going to be a lot of encouragement on writing burn plans and doing a lot more prescribed fire, et cetera. So we're really trying to show folks how IFTDSS can be used to enhance a burn plan. So this is one example for the sort of that description of your fire area using the fuel model reports, et cetera, to help beef up that part of your burn plan. That compare weather example that Caroline showed, a great place to put in for writing a prescription, showing the low, desired high end of your prescription and how that might vary based on your parameters that you're looking to use to meet your objectives. So that's a great use for that tool. Using it for a holding plan, again, for a burn plan, showing those points of concern, where are we going to have higher flame lengths or faster rates of spread, and how we might need to mitigate that with our organization and resources on hand for a burn plan. This is sort of gaming out a spot fire, for example, if you're doing a treatment plan of some kind, to again show what your contingency plan might need and how that relates to your organization and resources that you might want to consider when you're planning these prescribed fires. So that's sort of a prescribed fire example. This goes back to using that exposure and integrated hazard analysis. That's sort of the pieces that lead up to a risk assessment. This was a project that was done on the Apalachicola in Florida. And the idea was, after one of the hurricanes, they had a bunch of blowdown, and they wanted to go in and look at some of their values and look at their proposed burn units, and to see where the exposure was to those. These were, I think, RCW, red cockaded woodpecker colonies, and they wanted to prioritize based on some of the map information to say, if we only have a limited amount of time and money and resources, where's the so anyway, this was an approach that they used to use that part of IFTDSS to help inform their choices when it came to which burn units to select for that year. So that's an interesting treatment prioritization example. Quantitative risk assessment, of course, is a much more involved process, usually at the an interagency level, often involving partners. It sort of depends on what your scale is, of course. We could use the risk assessment in IFTDSS, like I said at the beginning, you could use it at a very local level, like on a forest district, for example. You could scale it up to the whole forest, and sort of anything in between, sort of depending on what your needs are. The nice thing about IFTDSS is I know, folks have done a lot of these risk assessments, and they get their product, but because they weren't the ones clicking the buttons necessarily, it's hard to go back and update those over time as, as treatments change and disturbance changes. You want to maybe go back and update your risk assessment. IFTDSS will let you do that. You can go back in and add new data, say a year or two later, and rerun the analysis. So that's a real benefit to using the risk assessment process in IFTDSS. So we're right in the middle of developing an online course to teach people how to use the risk assessment. So as soon as we get that finished, it'll probably be towards the beginning of the summer. We'll share that with everybody so you can learn on how the risk assessment works. This is an example from Zion National Park using the risk assessment and looking at the park as a whole and looking at the the net value change towards the final products here as we look at, high threat, high benefit on the green side, the high benefit on the green side and threat on the red side of the spectrum here. So these are some of the products that you can get out of the risk assessment. And there's many ways that this could be useful in selecting treatment priorities or wildfire response, as the case might be. If you include, fire benefit in your area, this can be a great tool to use to sort of illustrate where that might occur on your landscape. So places to learn about IFTDSS. We have a whole myriad of things in the help system. I really recommend the recorded webinars that we have, and you can reach those from the Help Center at the top right side of the application. And then just go to the webinar links. And we have a webinar on almost every major part of IFTDSS. And it's a great overview showing more detail on each of the pieces that Caroline talked about today. We also have a user forum that's available in the help system. When people have ideas that they want to share with us, we encourage folks to post things there. We try to respond to those fairly quickly. Or if you just have a question, we kind of have our most frequently asked questions that come from users in that forum, and users can answer other users' questions and such. So definitely take a look in there if you have some questions. You can search on it and find a term that might fit what you're looking for. And of course, just the Help Center in general, we have tutorials, there's short videos, there's some walkthroughs, screen captures, etc. A lot of technical documentation and reference information. If you're trying to find a little background on how something was done in the application, that's a great place to start. So I really encourage folks to check out those resources. Another thing we're building, like I said, there's going to be a course on risk assessment coming. We have an overview of IFTDSS. It's an online training course. It takes a couple hours to go through. It's located on the Wildland Fire Learning Portal. And if you haven't visited there yet, you can go to that link that's on the screen. You can, with a .gov address, it's very easy to get an account in the portal. And most partners are able to get accounts in the learning portal as well. There is a guest account option. So if you just want to do one of the self-study classes, you can just log in as a guest. But this IFTDSS overview is available as a self-study, and we'll walk you through the major pieces of IFTDSS. And as we build the risk assessment class, this is where it will be located. We're also working on an online course on how to use IFTDSS for prescribed fire plans with some of those examples that I just showed you a few minutes ago. There's also some other great pieces in the portal that relate back to IFTDSS. If you're learning about fuel models or fuel moisture, there's a ton of other little modules in that learning portal that can help support your learning in IFTDSS. So I think that's probably all we have time for to cover. I want to be sure we have some time for questions. I know we've answered quite a few in the chat, but I want to turn it back over to Lexi and let us know what we're supposed to do next. But we'd love to have some questions and discussion if that's possible.
Thank you so much. Yes, we would love to have some time for more questions. If anyone has any, feel free to put some of those in the chat. The team has been very good about answering the other questions that have popped into the chat. So we might go back and answer some of those here if needed, if you need any more clarification, or feel free to turn on your camera and ask a question on video if you would like to do it that way. In the meantime, I just have one note. We are offering the continuing education credits for these webinars. So I just posted a link for the attendance form in the chat if you have been able to listen to this presentation. So go ahead and use that if needed. All right, looks like we have a question from Richard. Richard, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
My apologies, my camera isn't working, government computer.
No problem.
Anyways, I'm just wondering on thoughts on modeling effects of long-term drought in here, and a good way to describe that both for our strategic planning and for like some of our burn plan prep. We're seeing fire behavior on the Red Deer Lodge, even though our fuel moistures are within range and what we're looking at, but we're seeing these kind of different fire behavior than folks are seeing here. And I'm just struggling to find a way to really model that for our burn plans and for some of our long-term planning. Our drought here in this part of the Montana has been long-term severe. So just wondering on thoughts on that and some tools within IFTDSS to help with that.
You want that one, Caroline, or?
Sure. Well, maybe
you go first, and then I can add if you'd like.
As I said, we were not hired for our modeling expertise per se, but I mean, we're limited by the models that we're running in the application, and I showed super quickly, but you know, long-term drought is not necessarily reflected in 110, 100 fine woody, and then the live herbaceous and the live woody fuel moistures. It can be somewhat, but other than you know, some modifications perhaps to the landscape, I don't have great suggestions for how to incorporate long-term drought into the existing models that we have. But if there's any modeling experts out there, feel free to pipe in.
Yeah, I don't know if Carol or if Nicole has a thought on that one, but I was just going to quickly say some of the tools, just for starters, if you're kind of trying to sort through some of the modeling for the first time, using the auto 97th, which is the 97th percentile, you know, weather. What IFTDSS does is it goes to the closest RAW station and does that calculation for you, and then runs the 97th percentile. So for me, when we're trying to help folks understand how to use IFTDSS as a tool, if you start with that at least, then you know you're at least, you know, as long as you're confident your weather stations have good data, you can at least start there and look at your 97th percentile, look at your fire behavior outputs from that run, then look at what your prescription parameters, you know, you might consider, and sort of do some comparison between, you know, what you would typically want in a prescription parameter versus what you're getting at a 97th, you know, percentile in IFTDSS. That would be a great compare weather use in IFTDSS, I think. At least it's a starting point. So, you know, a lot of the, like you said, a lot of the fire behavior we're seeing, even though, you know, we want to light these prescribed fires under our quote prescribed conditions, we're really ending up with maybe more 97th percentile type of fire behavior. So when you're planning these things, whether it's contingency or holding, et cetera, you know, using that 97th percentile, at least as a starting point, could inform, you know, where, even though you think you're going to light it under prescribed, you know, desired parameters, your resulting fire behavior might be more on the 97th percentile end. So I hope that makes sense. But using that compare weather in IFTDSS could show those things side by side. And then, of course, your local knowledge, you know, you might have to fine tune that some. But that might be a good starting point.
Yeah, thank you. Those are good ideas. I appreciate that.
That's a great question. Now, it's something I think a lot of people are dealing with now, you know, and that everlasting question, or, you know, comment that people make, wow, I just didn't expect it to do that. So it's almost like we need to model these things with that in mind and plan on it.
Great. We have a couple more questions in the chat. One from Andrea: how well is tree mortality standing dead captured?
Is that one for me?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's not necessarily your landscape data is what it's going to use, your land fire landscape data. So there are things you can do with the editing of the landscape where I showed that might try and represent the types of outputs you're seeing with landscapes that have standing dead and the associated, spotting and that sort of thing that you might see with them. But the resolution of the landscape land fire data is not really super fine, nor, it's more of a surface spread model. So the standing dead is not necessarily captured very well in that land fire data.
Thanks. I'm going to scroll back up to another question that Nicole gave a very thorough answer for, but maybe could use a little more discussion if you want to talk about it. It's have there been model checks given all the fires the past couple of years? What's the accuracy for burn severity predictions?
Not sure if you guys wanted me to unmute and take that one.
We do.
Caroline can.
Help yourself,
Yes,
Nicole.
we love it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Didn't want to step on toes. So kind of what I wrote in the chat is, within IFTDSS, the user brings their inputs to the table. So that's both the landscape, which Caroline mentioned, you can edit and modify if you need to, as well as kind of your fire environment and weather inputs. So you're kind of modeling thousands of fires for one set kind of fire environment or weather scenario. So those are held constant across all of the fires that are run within that model, and they only represent, which I didn't put in the chat, a single burn period. So, the outputs are really supposed to look at, a single day problem fire, worst scenario kind of situation, like what keeps you up at night if a fire were to burn under these conditions tomorrow. So with that being said, it is a conditional burn probability. It also outputs conditional intensity in the form of a flame length, a probabilistic flame length. So those can be used to understand the likelihood of fire occurring as well as the intensity, but that doesn't really answer the severity question per se, because fire severity is the effect of fire on, vegetation. So that's not something the model is actually designed to do. So there haven't been any checks back to other fires, and it is up to the user to bring those inputs to the table. So then they also need to look at them and make sure that they make sense. Like, do they pass the red face test? Does that make sense for the vegetation, the fuels you have on the ground, and the fire conditions you're setting up for the model? So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's a good answer, Nicole. Thanks. And there's another question in here. I was just about to type the answer as far as tree mortality and any of the models that run fire effects. So we don't have tree mortality in any of the current modeling in IFTDSS, but we are working with Duncan Lutz and folks up at the lab for the spatial FOFM, and we're hoping in the future we'll be able to incorporate more fire effects types of outputs and such. So it's on the list, but we're working towards that.
Great. So I have not seen any additional questions in the chat, but we have a few more minutes here. So if anyone wants to put any last minute questions, or if Kim or Caroline, you have any final comments? Looks like we have one more. Sorry. Is there a written description of how using the conditional burn probability rather than the traditional FSIM burn probability affects the interpretation and results of a QRA?
Oh, that's a great Nicole question.
I feel like in the help we have a little bit, because the traditional QRAs typically use a different model called FSIM, or Large Fire Simulator, and it simulates multi-day fires. So it is not just that one burn probability under constant conditions. It's fires over time with different weather for multiple days. But as far as a true written place that I can think of, I'm not sure if I know any, but I believe we'll be covering that in the help system that Kim mentioned that we're working on creating right now for risk assessments.
There's definitely some stuff in the help. It depends on the level of technical depth I think you're looking for, but we anticipated that people would have that question.
Yeah, there you go. Josh threw the link in there for the burn probability help content And again, that we are, like I said, working to build that online course for risk assessment. And that's a question a lot of people have, how is the risk assessment in IFTDSS different than, some of the risk assessments done, sort of on a one-on-one, idea with using FSIM. So it's a good question. And we do have a little.
I guess maybe if I could add one thing to that. So with that compare functionality, the beauty in IFTDSS for the burn probability is that you can run it relatively quickly. With a FSIM run, you're waiting for the latest run, then it's sort of on the shelf, the outputs until the next run. And you can try different runs in IFTDSS and compare and see the sensitivity of the model or lack thereof. Sometimes you'd be surprised, and sort of get a sense of confidence for the burn probability modeling that way.
Yeah, just quick show my screen here in the Help Center and where to, if you look under the modeling section, and then you can scroll down through the different pieces, for example, burn probability, whether it's the technical documentation or other things like that. You can find a lot of that in here. So if you don't find your answer there and you need a better answer, feel free to hit us up and we can try to answer things in a little more depth than maybe we have here on the presentation.
All right. Thank you all so much. I think we will wrap things up then, if that is all right with you guys. Thank you all for joining us. I am just going to share my screen again very quickly. So we have, like I said at the beginning, 8 of these presentations lined up. And so next week we will be having a presentation from Crystal Stonecipher on the aviation use summary, analytics to inform decisions and risk management. And we thank you all for coming here and joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at our future Science You Can Use webinars this spring. Thank you, Kim and Caroline. It was great having you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Have a great day.